Hi, Jaryd Krause, host of the Buying Online Businesses podcast. And in this episode, I'm speaking with Speer from eCommerce And they are one of the largest online business lenders with over $275 million in loans and are trusted by all the top brokers in our space. So what they actually do is they help people buy website businesses by getting them financing through SBA loans. In this episode, Stephen and I talk about what type of loans that they can structure, the different types of loan agreements, what you need to have in place and for your preparation to get approved for a loan, and what we need for a business to be approved for a loan. We also talk about what type of different business models that they do finance. And then we also talk about why you should start off slowly by buying a smaller site and building as you grow, to ensure that you don't put too much stress on yourself in your investment career and start building a portfolio that grows bigger and bigger over time with your knowledge and experience and also your finances too. So if you're looking to buy a website business and you're wanting to use finance, make sure you go away and listen to this episode, because Stephen and I break down everything you need to know about how getting approved for financing when buying a website business. Today's episode is brought to you by Investors Club. Investors Club is a marketplace for serious buyers interested in proven businesses that aren't listed anywhere else. There is a free membership where you can get access to 14-day-old listings and can purchase due diligence reports for $47 each. Or if you become a paid member, you can get instant access to every single listing, unlimited due diligence reports, no fee escrow services, access to exclusive offers from Investor Club partners, and priority support. Now, sellers do sign a 2-month exclusivity agreement to only list with Investors Club. There are no purchase fees or commission, meaning the seller nor the buyer ever pay commission in any deal. And every due diligence report provides next level metrics to make sure due diligence is far less time consuming, making it quicker for you to seal the deal. Also, Investors Club have a great Q&A support available both for buyers and sellers. I'm a full member myself personally, and a lot of thought and effort has gone into this service. However, there are a limited amount of seats for this membership, so go and check them out at that URL, investors.club. That is investors.club. Hey, Stephen, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for jumping in.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
So good to have you. Your name's been mentioned a couple of times. I've sent a couple of clients to you to look at getting financing for deals, and it's so good what you're doing in the space. It's a solution that so many people are needing, and helping people get started in buying sites. So you're from eCommerce lending. For those who don't know, there'll be links in the show notes. But I wanted to get stuck into questions straight away, because there's so many things that people are wanting to know about, like how can I get financing? It's a big subject in our space, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
So I guess people come to me, they look to buy a site, and sometimes people don't have all the funds. And I mean, rightly so, because some of the businesses are more expensive than they may be able to afford at the moment. So when people start out, they come to you to get financing, but sometimes I've noticed people do it at the wrong time, when they're halfway through due diligence, or they've already put an offer in and they've got an agreement. They may even have an APA signed, and they come to you, Stephen, and they're like, I need financing. And you're like, well, you should have probably talked to me about this prior to doing due diligence, right? So how long does it normally take to get approval?
Well, I think first and foremost, to kind of take a step back, you're exactly right. A lot of people will put their LOIs in and then go, oh gosh, I got to get financing. And two things are missed. First off, they don't even know if they could qualify for an acquisition, nor does a seller. And secondly, does a business itself qualify? So two very important pieces of the puzzle are missed when you simply have a buyer and a seller agreeing to an LOI, and then everybody starts the process. So really it takes, what we recommend here at eCommerce Lending is really taking a step back as a buyer and be able to get pre-qualified, and then really start your search full on. And then we could also assist not only once the buyer gets pre-qualified, but be able to vet the businesses that the buyer's looking at to determine if they qualify, if the business is eligible for SBA financing.
Yeah, so there's two pieces to that puzzle, right? Because somebody could be approved because they could have a good financial position, but they may be looking at a business that's not eligible, correct?
Correct. And it happens less so now, but definitely it's happened a lot in the past. And I think we've been good about educating buyers out there with numerous podcasts and LinkedIn clips, et cetera, and being able to educate them to say, listen, before you even start your search, get your pre-qualification lined up. Then you can go to town and look at businesses to acquire. And it's worked out really well.
Yeah. And they will start to learn which businesses will be more eligible for SBA lending once they've spoken to you anyway and got pre-approval, correct?
Right. And also it helps set their price point. We've had buyers where really based on their skill set and their personal liquidity, they qualify for a lot less than what they thought they wanted to buy. For example, we had a client recently wanting to buy a $3 million company, but he had zero e-commerce experience and had very little liquidity. Well, that person's not eligible for a $3 million acquisition. So it's really not only being able to pre-qualify somebody, Jaryd, but also making sure that their skill set and their liquidity match to what target price they're trying to obtain.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to add to that because what I find really important, Stephen, in our space is relationships. And I like to look at the long game, the long picture and the macro vision. And I guess when we first get started, we're just so excited and we want to jump in and we want to make things happen. And that was me when I first started. And as I take a step back and I start learning more and start teaching more, is I realized that what I had done wrong and what a lot of other people do wrong is they rush into this and they end up doing due diligence on deals and, putting LOIs down and getting really close to purchasing a deal. And they're not eligible to buy it because they don't have the financing themselves personally, or they can't be pre-approved for financing. And what's just happened that they may not even consider, which is not great at all, is that they've just spent so much time with the seller and so much time with a broker. And if they did this multiple times, what happens is that broker starts to get a bad taste in their mouth working with that person. And so does the seller. And it's not good for that person's reputation when they're just starting out. I mean, they're starting off on the wrong foot. So I think it's important, right, that they understand how to do this process the right way.
Absolutely. And also you could really impress a broker and seller. Imagine a buyer coming to you, Jaryd, and saying, listen, I've been pre-qualified, ready to go, ready to rock and roll. And you're going, really? And here's my letter from eCommerce Lending or whatever financial institution they end up going with. That's really impressive for the broker saying, gosh, this guy is really has his ducks in a row. And for a seller going, okay, I'm going to carve out an hour or two tomorrow to talk to the buyer. It's worthwhile because this guy's ready to go. He's ready. He's got his financing lined up. He's ready to move forward. So It's really imperative.
Yeah, it's certainly impressive. I mean, I just imagine myself being a broker or even just, somebody coming in and saying, I've got X amount of money. This is the business model I want to buy. These are the criteria of what business I can buy that's going to be approved or eligible for lending. It's just all there. And the preparation is so important. It really is. So
it is. And also, Jaryd, one quick interjection, our model or the way we consult our clients is not just, hey, yes, you're pre-qualified, but really dig down deep in terms of the types of businesses they're looking at acquiring, the price point. We ask a series of questions right up front. They actually complete a questionnaire and allows us to really dive deep and know exactly what they're looking for. Well ahead of time, and also yes, pre-qualify them, but we go pretty deep with our buyers.
Yeah, that's great. It's not just this. I can see as we talk more, it's not just a service that you have of just getting lending and here you go, here's a bunch of cash. It's really helping them as much as possible. And I guess that's a catch-22. You need that for the lending too, but it's so valuable that you guys have that care factor. So people, they find out about you, they want to buy a site. The first step is to come to you and kind of fill out a sheet, have a conversation and see what's right. So what do they need to be approved? Like what sort of position do they need to be in financially, or like I know that we've talked about off air, like residents of the States, and what are some of the credentials they should have in their favor?
The key things that we look at are, business acumen, and that's something that I derive from our consultation we have with the buyer. We also look at the questionnaire and look at the type of business they're trying to acquire, and to make sure their skill set kind of matches up to what they're trying to acquire. And even if they don't have direct industry experience, it's okay. Indirect could also be, is a good thing, obviously. So we don't always, our buyers oftentimes don't have direct industry experience, but they have other experiences that are fit really well within running an e-commerce business. But we look at personal liquidity. Most SBA loans require 10% injection or down payment. We look to make sure they have that liquidity, and even then some, because we don't want to leave a buyer in a situation where after he or she buys a company that they're literally broke post-closing. You're trying to make sure they have enough dry powder to continue to scale that business. So that's something else we look for. And just other things that we look for in being able to help determine what they're pre-qualified for.
Yeah, cool. So in terms of finding out like their experience, so they just, you just have a conversation with them, or they give you a bit of, they just email you a bit of information about themselves and stuff, or how does that
During
work?
the consultation, we ask a series of questions. First and foremost, do you have direct or indirect industry experience? Oftentimes they say indirect. I said, okay, I'm handing over an e-commerce business. What skill set do you have that would allow you to really continue to scale this business? And I just let them talk, and I type up notes while they're talking, but I'm able to determine from that conversation to determine their profile. And sometimes there are people that have a very strong skill set looking for a lower price point. And sometimes we have people with not such great skill set looking for a lot higher price point, and we're able to kind of bring them back to earth and say, okay, based on your skill set, you probably should be looking at this price range, because as you kind of work up the food chain, the more skill that we look for in terms of being able to qualify. So if you're looking at a $500,000 company, the skill set requirement is a lot lower than if you're looking at a $5 million company, obviously. So that's something that we look at. But so series of questions during the interview, the questionnaire, which gives us kind of a broader snapshot of their profile, along with a personal financial statement that reflects their liquidity, their debt service, their personal debt service, et cetera. And all those pieces put together helps us determine what they're pre-qualified for.
Cool.
What amount they're qualified for.
Cool. And so these are SBA loans, right? So yes. SBA loans are strictly to American residents, or can somebody have, I know I've got clients that have bought sites in the States and have set up themselves a digital home office with an address and a phone number and all that sort of stuff. Is that possible to go down that route if you're a non-resident? Because I know this is probably something that's, it might even be a touchy subject for you, because there's so many people in the world that want to go down this route, right?
Well, it comes up a lot. And the two questions that we ask, there are kind of two qualifications that are required. First and foremost, on the buyer side, the buyer has to be either a U.S. citizen or green card holder residing in the United States. And on the seller side, the business has to be domiciled in the U.S. and be actively submitting U.S. tax returns. So those two things have to happen. And the only exception to the seller being in the U.S. or filing U.S. tax returns, the only exception to that is Puerto Rico, which if they're in Puerto Rico, which is part of our territory where the SBA loans are available. But so that kind of gives you a general idea, but those are two of the main questions. As a matter of fact, they come up so often that we put it on our website. Like, all right, first question to ask when you're looking at a business, is it in the United States? Yes or no? That's like, and so often I feel so bad, especially with some of our Canadian friends that, they go to sell their business and people are really interested in buying it, but then they realize the buyers end up realizing, the sellers end up realizing that the business doesn't qualify for SBA financing because of that eligibility rule.
Yeah, I mean, for those people who are selling businesses, say over 500K to up to the 5 million, they definitely lower their or cut off portion of their pool of possible buyers, because SBA lending is getting so predominant now, especially in our space. It's quite a common term. I want to talk about so many things within SBA, but the first thing that I probably want to talk about is like the cash injection. So if I want to buy, just for example, I want to buy $100,000 business, I'd need to have 10K liquid to put into the business. And then if it was a 500K site, I'd need to put 50K in. Or would it get more as I go or less as I go? Say if I want to buy $1 million business, would it just be 100K?
Generally up to about $1 million. It's as long as a business can support the debt service of the proposed loan, it's 10%. Or in this case, depending on the price point, it's 10% of that price point. So as if you're trying to acquire let's say $5 million business, it's going to be more than a bare minimum of 10%. Most lenders will not lend at 90% financing on a $5 million acquisition. Where anything south of about $1 million, 10% all day long, as long as the business, the tax returns reflect enough cash flow to service that debt.
Okay. And so you mentioned you'd need to be paying American taxes. The business needs to be paying American taxes. Is there a certain period of time, would it be like 1 year to 2 years or 3 years, that business would need to be paying taxes to ensure that it's eligible for the SBA loan?
So 2 years.
Okay.
2 years. So right now it'd be 2018, 2019, and then year to date 2020.
Okay, cool. And
minimum 2 years.
And so people that are going to purchase these businesses through SBA, are they buying them in their personal name, or are they setting up an LLC and buying it through a company?
Great question. They'll be setting up either an LLC, S Corp, C Corp, whatever that entity type is, and that entity will be doing the acquiring.
Yeah.
And on the SBA loans, just one quick thing that I like to touch on is that it's not the SBA lending the money. All the SBA is insuring the loan. So it protects the lender against a default. It also lessens, obviously, the risk that the lender has in lending on that type of loan. And that question comes up a lot. A lot of people think that it's actually the SBA underwriting the loan and funding the loan. It is not. Lenders follow the SBA guidelines. They're doing the lending of that loan, and the SBA is doing the insuring of that loan or the guarantee of that loan. So I wanted to touch on that.
Oh, that's great, because basically what you are is you're a broker and you get finance, and correct me if I'm wrong, you get finance from different suppliers or different companies, financing or lending companies. And then the SBA is sort of a government-backed insurance policy for the loan, right?
It's an insurance company. It just happens to be run by the government, for better or for worse. Anyway, but so we're a loan intermediary. We work with we have several lending partners, close to a dozen of them, that have a dedicated staff to our high volume, and they're used to doing e-commerce loans. A lot of lending institutions don't do e-commerce loans, and the ones that do don't understand it. They're like flying blind. If you use the word FBA, like, what's that? Like, okay, going by Amazon, or 3PL, like 3PL, what is that? A spaceship? What is that? Our new car that just came out? So, so we're able to navigate through, and our lending partners, our underwriting teams at various lending partners that we use understand the space, and that's why we have 97% success in providing financing for our clients.
Yeah, it's so good that you can understand the dropship, FBA, 3PL, and SEO, and all that different stuff that's in our industry, and go away and get financing for it. Now, I want to talk about the different businesses you do normally get lending for. But first, I want to talk about, just continue with the SBA, because I've heard about this CARES Act that one of my clients has got approved for. where I think a portion of the payments, and it's just through a period of time through where we're going economically, but they're approving for some of the payments to be helped or helping her with some of the payments through a CARES Act. Is that correct?
Yeah, so right now we have the CARES Act going on. So if you close on a business acquisition between now and September 27th, I believe, the first 6 payments are paid by the SBA to the lender. They're not deferred.
Company. Yeah.
So the SBA will make your mortgage or make your loan payments to the lender. And it's not a deferment. They're actually being paid by the lender. By the SBA. So buyers out there, if there's any good time to buy, right now is it. I mean, the first 6 payments. Your first payment, I believe, will end up being in December because there's a 30-day lag and then your 6 payments out. So
yeah, we were talking before we jumped on the podcast. We're not going to get into any of the world economy and what's happening, but not just that as a great opportunity, but we're talking about the opportunities that are coming for us. And I'm really excited for it. I was letting you know that I was looking at businesses, but that's just one opportunity stacked on with the other ones. And I think it's, like you said, it's an exciting time and for us in our space as buyers anyway. So the deals, the different types of business models. So you do e-commerce sites. Do you do not just drop shipping and FBA and stuff like that, but what about, say, content websites or, say, SaaS websites?
Absolutely.
You do?
Absolutely. So virtually anything, say, service-driven, we do a lot of SaaS business, and it's ever increasing every year. Back in 2015, 2016, when we got into the space, what's SaaS? Like nobody knew about it. And basically virtually product-based businesses were 100% of the type of business that we were financing. And every year it's increased. So a lot of our deals are SaaS businesses, service-based businesses.
Yeah, great. And back to the structure and the loan, what happens, let's just talk about worst case scenario. So say somebody buys a business, they're eligible, the business is eligible, and worst case scenario that the business is, and even the owner has skills in digital marketing to grow the site. For whatever reason, something has happened outside of their control within the industry or the niche of that site. Say, for example, something happened and they couldn't make repayments for whatever reason. How long until the loan gets shut down, and do they, if the business gets foreclosed and it gets taken over by the insurance company, SBA, what happens to the individual? This is just worst case scenario type stuff.
Yeah, well, fortunately, the industry has extremely low default rate. We've done over $275 million in the space. Amazing. We have 3 loans that have defaulted.
Wow.
And that's a heck of a track record. So it's very rare. Usually what happens is the bank will work with the buyer and try to work something out. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, they're liable. They're liable for that loan. And, they'll be going to court and they'll have a judgment against them. Yep. It's very rare that it happens, but there is risk, just like anything. If you don't make your car payment, the car gets taken away. If you don't make a house payment, your house gets taken away. And in the e-commerce online business space, there's really nothing there. Really, there's no real tangible asset. Yeah, there's inventory, but really there's really nothing there. And they'll essentially, your business gets shut down. That's essentially what happens.
Yeah. And I wanted to cover that because I've spoken to people that are outside of our industry using SBA and even inside of industry, and just so excited about anybody can get approved and it's super simple and easy and you can just buy any business with it or do anything with any business with it. But I think it's really important for people to understand the repercussions if you don't know what you're doing and you don't have experience or skills and you're not eligible as well. It's important to understand that there is, things can go wrong in business and it happens all the time. So I think it's not just worth rushing into it and saying, yeah, it's easy and there's things that we need to put in place
absolutely. And we
first.
do say no to some buyers. There have been cases where we've said no to buyers, there's just not a good match. Typically it's when the buyers has already moved forward with an LOI. But case in point, a couple of years ago, I had a buyer come to me and I couldn't believe he was trying to acquire the company he was trying to acquire. I passed on the loan opportunity. He went to another lender, and sure enough, within 6 months, he went under. His skill set at the end of the day wasn't nearly what it needed to be to run that company. And I think it was a $3 million acquisition. So that's one reason why we do so much due diligence up front, Jaryd, to make sure we don't set our buyer up for failure. We set him or her up for success in various ways. And sometimes they don't like to hear, us say no, but ultimately we're trying to say, listen, we really recommend you not buying a $3 million company. You should be buying whatever, $500,000 company. And you can always buy a $3 million company once you get your sea legs and learn the business and buy multiple businesses over time. And that's really, it has to do with the vetting up front. It's very important for lenders to do that.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that example, because what happens is people can go away and be like, all right, I'm going to buy something that's like the max that I can get approved for, and say they don't have experience like this guy. Is what happens is, I think people forget about the macro in the long term, is they just go, wow, like I could run this for maybe a year and it's going to stop and it's going to go bankrupt. And that means I'm going to go bankrupt, which means I'm going to get put back 5 years. And then even in that time, I need to, save a bunch more money, and I don't have a very good track record. My my lending record's not very good, or I forget what you called your profile, financing profile, or credit rating is not good. Right. They get put back so many years, where if they just started small steps with like, all right, I'm going to buy a 100K site, and then I'll buy a 300, and then I'll buy a 700K or $1 million site, and then slowly work their way up. I think it's just less stress for them as well, because
absolutely,
when you're buying a smaller business, you've got less stress, and you need normally a little bit less knowledge, depending on the business. Obviously, there's caveats there to what I'm just saying, but a lot less stress. And I think getting into business with the least amount of stress helps you make better business decisions and trajectory of the business.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And that's a really good point. Another thing we try to stress is you're not buying a house. Okay. When you buy a house, you don't need a skill set other than your day job. But when you buy a business, you better have the right skill set, or you're going to go down in flames. So, and I really try to emphasize that during the consultation call that I have with our clients, our buyers, is that you're not buying a house, you're buying a business. So we really try to hit that home, because the first thing they'll try to do is compare buying a business with buying a house. It's like not the same thing at all.
Mm-mm. It's a far superior investment with a big if you know how to run that investment, because you don't need to run a house like you do a business. So when some people are like, I want to buy a $3 million business, and what's the least amount of or the smallest loan that you have got approved for a possible buyer?
The smallest loan, typically it's around $350,000.
Okay.
But it just depends on the client. We have clients that have a portfolio of businesses. So they might come to us with a $350,000 purchase, and then buy a $4 million business, and then go back to a $500,000 business, and have a portfolio of businesses. So, but generally 350 is generally the smallest. But in terms of your point, one additional thing I like to comment on is that a lot of these e-commerce businesses, and when I use the word e-commerce, I incorporate that it's kind of like saying Kleenex. It means, online businesses, it means SaaS,
online businesses. Yeah, cool.
Online businesses. So, you could buy an online business and just generally put 10% down payment or injection. A lot of these businesses are growing at 20% year over year. That's a 200% return on your investment. Where are you going to get a 200% return on your investment, Jaryd? Nowhere. So
and when we started years ago, it was far better, the return.
Right. Right. So, and so a lot of our clients could pay cash for businesses, and they choose not to because they want to buy multiple businesses over time, and they want to get that huge return on investment as opposed to draining their liquidity and paying cash for a business.
Yeah. And then you got opportunity costs and inflation and all that sort of stuff on top of that. I guess that's a bit more advanced, but just the return on your investment when you're using lending and it's available now, specifically to US residents, it's absolutely excellent. And we need to still stress the importance of knowing how to run an online business, which is where I help people. So we've got a good winning combo between us. But I think it's just so hard to get that ROI for somebody, the average Joe, walking up the street with, say, anywhere from 30 to 50K ready to invest. It's, if you've got a bigger fund behind you, you can get those returns because you've got knowledge and skilled investors and finances. But for the average Joe to come in to a market, it's really exciting for us.
It's so cool. We have clients that bought really small businesses 3, 4, 5 years ago, and now they're reaching out to us again and going, "Hey, we're buying a $5 million business, a $4 million business." It's really exciting how they've grown in the space and they've been successful. A lot of our clients are buying their competitors, which is kind of interesting. We've had that happen a few times last year. So that was pretty exciting, which, a lot of synergy there when you're buying your competitor and being able to really continue to scale that business. So it's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, when you're buying your competitor and you're buying smaller brands within your niche and industry, the ROI is so much better. And that's why bigger funds are paying bigger multiples for them, and they're still getting the ROI on them. Let's talk a bit about loan structure or what's involved, like in percentage interest they need to pay, loan term agreements, and just the basic stuff, like how long is a typical loan and stuff like that.
So for business acquisition, SBA loans are 10 years. They're not 7, they're not 5, they're 10 years. And in terms of interest rate, they're at 6% right now. So the lowest I think they've ever been.
Wow.
Or pretty close to it. So 6%, it's a 10-year loan. And question should be, what does that loan what's that loan made up of? It's made up of the business acquisition, any inventory that you're going to be acquiring from the seller, any additional inventory that you want to buy after closing, and also all the closing costs. So all that put together is the loan. All those points. So again, we want to give our clients enough dry powder post closing that they can continue to scale the business without running out of cash.
Yeah, that's great. So when we say, we've got website flippers here, and they will buy sites and we'll hold on to them for maybe 2-3 years. Is it possible to close out the loan after a 3-year period and finish it off? Is that
Yes.
You can do that?
Yes, and without penalty. That's a really good question, Jaryd. Cool. Yes, and you could prepay all you want. A lot of commercial loans do have prepayment penalty, but SBA business acquisition loans do not.
That's amazing. So, you could buy something and 18 months later, you could say just grow it by 30%, sell it, pay out the loan, and take your ROI, and then come back to you, Stephen, and go bigger.
Absolutely.
Once you've got the knowledge and experience. Yeah. Which is good because, when you think about it, guys, people that are listening, Stephen, is that if you start out smaller and you buy something for 350K, right, you might have 35K there. Obviously, don't go away and buy this alone. If you've got Stephen's help and my help, or somebody else, to help you run the business, scale it and grow it, then you can go through that 18-month period and then go back to Stephen, and you've got yourself a team of, you could call us consultants or advisors, but these are people that are on your team, and you can leverage off them when you need and not need to keep paying them and stuff like that. And I feel like it's once you start to build that team around you, then you can start to learn and grow bigger and just come back to you, Stephen, when they need help, or come back to me or somebody else. And it's a winning formula because you don't need to keep, they don't need to pay you a recurring fee. They don't need to keep coming backwards and forwards. And I think it's a really good way to go for an investor, is having those people around them.
Absolutely. Great point. And that's one thing that I typically talk about during the consultation with our buyers, is that build your A-team. We call it the A-team around here. Build your A-team. Get your lender and get your broker, get your attorney lined up, your due diligence team, etc. Get your A-team together. And it's so important. And that's a really good point, Jaryd. Excellent.
Thanks. When you're talking about due diligence team, even if people don't end up working with me, what I do want them to do is go away and get my due diligence framework. It's been recognized by a lot of the big brokers and people in our industry, and have dubbed it quite good with some of the questions in there. So you can get that for free and you can learn due diligence just off your own back. I do suggest not doing it all the way by yourself, but at least take that as a starting point. And then prior to that, go to Stephen and check out where you can get started with a loan approval and what you could possibly purchase, what your skills are and all that. But Stephen, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for sharing everything you have today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and really looking forward to helping your buyers in whatever I can do to assist. Looking forward to that.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So where should we be sending people? Straight to eCommerceLending.com?
The best is emailing me directly, Stephen, and that's Stephen with a PH at eCommerceLending.com, or you could go straight to our website, eCommerceLending.com, and actually click on the pre-qualification tab, and it'll be able to launch the pre-qualification process. So either way is fine, and I try to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah, cool. If now that you have mentioned your email, this happened last time we had somebody on with financing. They got hounded by the action takers that we have listened to the podcast. So get ready for a lot of people. They'll be saying, "Hey, I just listened to Jaryd's podcast," and they're going to want to have a chat. But I'm glad that we can help them. So thank you so much again, and I look forward to having another chat soon.